Welcome to the Unraveled Podcast. My name's Alina.
And my name is Nina.
What are you talking about today?
Well, I think we had mentioned that character is something that's important. And then we kind of got into the topic of religion.
And our beliefs. So I know that both of us consider ourselves Christian. I know that, everyone's kind of upbringing is a little different when it comes to religion. So I'm curious to kind of know how that worked for you and kind of how your upbringing was in regards to that.
So I was born in Thailand to missionary parents.
Oh, I did not know that.
So it was kind of a combination of two different styles, technically non-denominational, but then eventually it was kind of a mix of house church, which is more common in some countries, to where it's either like a small hall or someone's home and you just kind of get together, and then you mix that with a more evangelical type of Christianity is how I was raised. So, the jumping on stage, the flashing lights, all that kind of stuff. But it was a good mix, which I think in hindsight provided balance, but raised very conservatively. And honestly, for at least the first 20 years of my life. What about you?
So is that how your family ended up in Thailand, was because your parents were missionaries?
Yeah. And
that is so interesting. I never thought to ask you that, but that makes so much more sense now.
Most people will think, oh, military, and I'm like, no, not military. But yeah, it's kind of, in hindsight, I think there was a lot of benefits to growing up in Thailand, learning the different language, culture, being able to experience, I guess, a little bit the best of both worlds in a way, because my parents, we celebrate all the American
holidays,
Christmas, Thanksgiving, all that stuff. But then also we got to celebrate all the local holidays and traditions and things like that.
That's awesome.
But yeah, what about you? How did you guys?
So I grew up in a interesting Christian household. Actually, let me back up a little bit. When I was living with my grandfather, my aunt was Catholic. So we went to Catholic church with her a lot occasionally. I was so young at that age. I just do not remember anything. I just remember like the basic Catholic styles, like the priest and the style of the church, the stained glass windows, like, all of that stuff that you see, in the Catholic church. And, but I don't know anything about being Catholic. None of that. I just tagged along for the trips to church. And I think I was probably maybe 9 or 10 at that age. And then when we were adopted by my mom's friend, we went to church. They were Christians. So we started off going to a Baptist church, and then we ended up changing to non-denominational. So at the time, I didn't know there was a difference. I didn't know about the different denominations. I just knew that we changed church. But my parents were very strict, and they also happened to be hypocrites too. Yeah. So it was very difficult growing up in a religious household, seeing your parents, say one thing and preach one thing, and then they do the complete opposite. Yeah. So for me, my faith was really hard to
well, it's hard to build if you don't have like an authentic example.
Exactly. So it was really hard for me to trust. It was very hard for me to trust in general, but also to trust in Christianity when I was being taught one thing and the people that were quote examples of my life weren't living by what they were teaching. Yeah. So I definitely strayed away from Christianity at that point. And I was like, this is just not for me if this is how people are. And over time, I've had to learn that you can't base your faith by how people live, because people will disappoint you. Yeah. People will disappoint you. That's just a given. No one's perfect. So you have to be able to find what works for you and what you believe and that what aligns with your values to make it make sense, or you will stray away from your faith. Yeah. So for me, when I left that household and I, grew up and I turned 18 and I was gone, I really had to do some like self-evaluation and searching for what worked for me. So I did a lot of studies, and I, talked to a lot of people, and they kind of helped educate me and help me understand what the Christian faith looked like, and also just who Jesus truly is. And also they taught me that, again, you can't base your faith by other people. Like they'll always disappoint you. It's always going to fail.
Yeah. I think part of how I was raised was authentic. And then part of it, I didn't know it wasn't authentic until I was like actually in person. So the house churches, people were so just, there was no ill intent. They were not wealthy. They were not there trying to make this mega church. It was just coming together, community. It was very just kind of small, local, family. And then when I was
organic, it sounds like.
Yes. It was just, some people were still learning. Some people had never seen a white person before. Some people had never heard who Jesus was. It was all just very innocent in a way. Very just, and that I enjoyed a lot. But then when I was older and I went away to my first mega church, man, I learned a lot. I learned a lot that, and this is not across the board. But
I'm assuming the mega church was non-denominational. In America was that?
No, so actually, I don't know how to not name drop. I'm just gonna have to. I went to Hillsong Church.
Shut up! I wanted to visit there before.
Oh dear.
I wanted to visit there.
I want to tell you things you won't want to hear. Well, so the biggest thing that I learned actually, because I grew up in music. Music is big in my family, and they did have great music. So I went there to study music, and first I found out that the degree is not transferable to anywhere in the world. So it's really just kind of like a gap year. But more than that, there are techniques that they teach people on stage to manipulate the crowd. So the way a song is played, the way you move, it's almost like more of a show than
I could see that.
An authentic. So,
I could see
for
that.
example,
in terms of me saying I can see that in terms of like just mega churches in general, because they almost operate all the same. Because I've went to a lot of them,
and it's not my place to say what is right or what is wrong. I just had no idea things were run that way.
Sure.
And I didn't connect with that as much because I just thought people were there, being authentic, people crying on stage. Well, they get to choose. So each week they pick the person who's going to cry on stage. And I was like, oh.
How did you find this out?
Because I was learning in the music department. So you have these classes.
Shut up.
Because what they do is they will train people, and then you'll go back to your home state or country, and then you can implement and teach other people.
Interesting.
So their music quality is excellent, top tier.
That's
the production quality, everything. I have, nothing bad to say about that. But it was more that I never realized, which was naive. Because if you think about how do they maintain a huge show, timing, lighting, all that stuff, there has to be some sort of structure. But then I just thought, well, I don't know about that. You have to be you have to have a certain type of clothing to be on stage. So then I was there for a period of time, and for whatever, we had differences of opinion when it came to some of the beliefs and things. So I moved on from there, and then I went to my roommate in college from there. Her dad had a small Baptist church in Georgia, and I got to be over there for a period of time, and that was so beautiful. That was my first time to live in the U.S., and that was the most amazing church, honestly. Just so kind, authentic, genuine. And I was still trying to figure out what version I connected with. But I realized more and more that kind of going back to the basics is what I preferred instead of a show. And then after that, I went to a different mega church in North Carolina for an internship. And that's where I really, really learned the difference. So I was an intern and a lot of volunteering. In essence, it's a lot of kind of free labor. They bring interns on to do all the work for really next to nothing. And I learned that there's a couple different scenarios. There was one time where this lady was volunteering for probably, 5+ years, every weekend. She was a single mom. Her husband had passed away, and she had a toddler who had a growth issue in his legs, and he needed surgery. So he was wearing braces. And she had been serving for over 5 years, and she asked the church to give her a loan so that she could get the surgery for her son because she couldn't afford it. And she said, I'll pay you back. You can do interest, but we have to do it when he's this old. Otherwise, it's too late. They told her no.
Wow.
And I was serving with her during the weekend. I was so mad. I wrote an email to every single person
at the church.
And I CC'd all the interns.
You're
I
passionate.
probably shouldn't have done that. I was just irritated. Like, what's the point of saying that we're here to help people serve?
If you're not.
Because this is someone, she's a widow. You know, you're supposed to help orphans and widows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I got myself a bad rap for doing that. But I have no regrets.
But you stood up for what you believed.
Yes. And the best part was a couple weeks before the internship was over, she ran up to me. She was crying, and they didn't give her a loan, but they're just going to pay for it. So that was, you know.
And that's what it should be, that sense of community.
And then there was another.
And support.
Yes. And then another time, they always will do like these giving services, which it's important to give and support and tithe. But they would always just be asking for money. And then they would use music to manipulate people around that.
This is at the mega church?
Mm-hmm. And then there was one specific for like the interns. And I mean, we all had no money. Truly, we were young, without resources. So I'm thinking, what are we supposed to give? You know? And so there was like a big kind of bowl in the center where you have to come down one by one to put in your donation. I did not donate that day. I wrote a verse about hypocrisy, put it in the envelope, and put it in there. But I remember just standing there feeling totally disconnected. It was almost like I was just over Christianity in general. I thought, you know, it's a joke. It's really a money-making scheme. And the people that are wealthy are the pastors and the leaders. They live in multi-million-dollar homes, and they can't even help people that need it. Now, this is just my experience. This is not across the board by any means.
And I actually hear that a lot from a lot of people. It also goes back to seeing how those people walk in their faith. But again, you cannot base your personal faith based on how what other people are doing. It has to be for yourself. And I think another thing that's very important to realize is everybody's walk with Christ, not even with Jesus. It can be in other religions. Like everybody's. What am I trying to say?
Well, everyone's choices
are going to be different. They're going to have a different experience. It's going to look different for each person. I know for myself, like growing up, I was basically like forced into church. Like I had to do this. I had to be a part of this. I had to be at church every Sunday. And it was too much. It was too much to the point where when I left, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Because
I didn't get the time to really figure out what I wanted to believe and what I wanted to do. I was just forced into it and just kind of thrown into it, that I was just following. Yeah. I was just following. But for myself, again, like for you to, I personally feel like for you to truly establish what you want to believe, you have to figure that on your own. Yeah. And you have to figure out what that looks like for you. Like my walk is not going to be the same as yours. And I have to figure out what that looks like for me and what works for me, because if you're not, then it's not going to be authentic for yourself.
Yeah. Agreed. And there's life experience, then there's people in your life. And a lot of times I think we're going to go to church because I said so, where you are almost forced to do this and do this without an explanation of why is community important?
Yes.
Why,
why is going to church on Sunday important? Like
what is the history of that? Nothing. It was just, we're going to church because I said so. And a lot of people, by the time they were adults, they were like, I'm going to have nothing to do with this mess.
Yes.
Because a lot of times the examples they had were such poor examples, the adult figures in their life. And I mean, to this day, sometimes you meet people that they claim to be all this and they're the worst people you've ever met.
Yeah.
And with the poorest character. And that's something I think is important, regardless of what somebody believes, to have your own standard and to have character. What do you think about when it comes to someone having true character and how that develops?
I think you definitely do what you say you're going to do and be the person that you say you want to be. I think that alone helps. I think that alone builds your character. I know for myself, one of the things that I strive to be is very honorable and do what I say I'm going to do. If I'm running 5 minutes late, you're going to know I'm running 5 minutes late, because that's the kind of person that I want to be. So I think that's very important.
Yeah. Because you can't really claim that you're a Christian without also having that character. And it's kind of like, what are you going to do behind closed doors? Will you do what's right? So, I mean, after that, honestly, again, I was young too, but then basically what I figured out was, for a period of time, I didn't quit Christianity per se, but I was just disinterested in dealing with any of the manipulation. I didn't want to be manipulated. I didn't want to donate one more dollar to somebody who already had a multi-million-dollar home when I barely was making it, you know. But then slowly over time, I realized that back to the basics. What does the Bible say about this? And a more traditional group of people just coming together to...
Feels more natural for you.
So that's kind of where I lean towards.
I know for myself, because I was so forced in Christianity, like when I grew up, even at this point, like I still feel weird going to church on Sundays. I'm not at the point where it feels natural to me yet. I like going on Sundays, but it doesn't feel, I don't know how to explain it. It just doesn't, it's hard to make it a routine for me because it's just not something I feel comfortable doing yet, because I feel like it reminds me of just being forced to have to go, if that makes sense. So I pop in every now and then, and I'm actually a member of a church, but I don't ever really go. I go occasionally on Sundays,
but you said
I hop around a lot.
You're part of a Bible study, right?
Yes. So I go to 2 different Bible studies. I go to one on Sundays and one on Wednesdays. And that for me feels more organic. It feels natural because I enjoy going to those, and I'm able to like sit down with a smaller group of people and really talk through things and learn more on a different level. But Sundays have been like just like really difficult for me because I just do not like going on Sundays. And it's not that I don't like the church or I don't like the people or anything of that sort. I think it just feels weird. Like it just doesn't feel as natural to me as going to a Bible study, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely does. I mean, that was the biggest thing that I think helped me transition from not wanting to be involved at all. I really thought back to what were the times where I felt connected to people.
Yes.
And it was in the house churches, and then it was in that small Baptist church in Georgia when I first moved here. And I just thought, okay, what that means is less show, less fancy lights, fancy auditorium, for me at least. For other people, that might be exactly what they need, but that's just kind of what I've chosen.
Agreed. And I like the verbiage you used on that, feeling connected with people and like your sense of community. And for me, I don't feel like I get that on going to church on Sundays. I feel like I get that in the Bible studies that I go to. I feel that sense of community. I feel that connection. And I love talking with the people in those groups. Versus me going on Sundays is just, I just don't have that same sense. And it may change over time. I don't know. But like right now, it's just been really hard for me that I still want to be like educated in my faith, that I still have to do something. And for me, that's going to Bible studies, and which I really enjoy doing.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that it's clear, because I'm thinking back, I probably sounded like a hater when I was talking about the different churches, but I think it is important.
This is your experience. It's your opinion.
I think it's important for there to be accountability, though. When it comes to finances, when it comes to, I've heard so many stories where a pastor is caught for, infidelity or, siphoning money away. Just the variety of things that come out, and checks and balances. If something gets too big, it's run as a corporation, a money-making corporation, instead of the intentions of bringing people together. So that's where I think there's a fine line.
I agree with that.
But I know in my family, there's some siblings that have chosen not to have anything to do with it at all, and some that are still Christian. But I think it's just, people have to do it based on their timeline.
Agreed. And it might not, and like you said, timeline, because it may not be for them now, but it may be for them later. And I know for me, it's taken me, I had a long gap period where it was just like, I was like, I don't want anything to do with this because of what I had went through previously. So like, I totally get it. And I know for myself, when it comes to like dating or friendships, or if I decide to have kids, which probably won't happen, but.
Wait a minute. You said you didn't, but now you said probably.
No, as I'm saying, it probably won't happen.
Oh.
Said if I decide, like in the small chance that I have a child, which probably won't happen, I'm still prepared for those conversations, because I don't want anyone in my life, whether it's a friend or relationship, to feel like I'm forcing them into something or pressuring them into something that they may not want to do. Yeah. I'll talk with you about it. I will, give you as much information as possible, but I don't want to force anything on you, because I know what that feels like. Yeah. And it needs to feel organic for someone. But also for you to be there and be able to support them on whatever decision that they make. So when I'm dating, it's not a criteria for me for my partner to be a Christian. They can be of a different religion. That's totally fine. I will respect that boundary. But I know if I have kids, I know that if I have kids, that regardless of what other religion my partner is, if they're in one or not one, I want to make sure we both have an understanding that our kids are not going to get forced into that.
Yeah.
We can educate them on what we want to educate them on, and they can decide what path they want to take with that.
Yeah. I agree. Everyone's experience is different. And I think as you work through life, you'll go through different phases. I remember before I married my husband, he and I had talked a lot about, because he was raised in a certain way that he felt disconnected from as well. And just trying to figure out what's true, what is meaningful, what can provide value, what can I really connect with. And, we went down the same path. But I think there's probably a lot of people that are, in our age group that have experienced just like a disconnect from how they were raised to how they're living now. And I think it's just a topic people should feel comfortable talking about, even if they're agreed to disagree, because we probably have more similar experiences than not.
That's true. I agree.
So, well, I think that is our time for today. Thank you again for joining us. We'll be back next week with another episode. You can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on YouTube and on social media. We'll see you next time.